Hey there, and welcome. Have you ever just looked around and wondered why we're all so, well, different? You know, why one person is the life of the party and another would rather stay home with a good book? Or why some people just get numbers while others are amazing artists? Well, today we're going to unpack the science behind that very question. I mean, really, take a second and think about it. What's that secret recipe of thoughts, feelings, and habits that makes you completely, fundamentally different from every other person on the planet? It's a massive question, right? And it's one that science is working hard to answer. And you know, this whole exploration of what makes us unique isn't just for late-night philosophical chats. It's actually the main focus of a whole field of science that's dedicated to understanding the human mind. That field is, of course, psychology. Now, the most important word in that definition, it's scientific. This isn't just about vague feelings or ideas. It's a really rigorous, methodical study of our inner world and how that shapes everything we do. To put it really simply, psychology is kind of like the instruction manual for the human brain that scientists are trying to write, piece by piece. It's all about figuring out what makes us tick. And that idea right there brings us to the absolute core of our topic today, the study of individual differences. This is the specific branch of psychology that zooms right in on that incredible variety in humanity and asks, okay, how and why are we all so different from one another? So, if you're a scientist and you want to study all these differences, you can't just guess. You need a system, a proper way to explore what makes each of us who we are. And that brings us to the actual methods they use. So how do they do it? How do they go from this big general idea that people are different to actually measuring and understanding those differences in a way that's reliable and, scientific? Well, they've got a specific process for that. The official name for this whole process is psychological assessment. And again, that word systematic is key. This isn't random guesswork. It's a structured, organized way of gathering information with a bunch of different tools and techniques. You know, to make this a little easier to picture, let's think of it like this. It's a psychologist toolkit. It's this special kit that's full of different instruments, and each one is designed to measure or understand a very specific part of a person. All right, so we've got this idea of a toolkit. Now let's crack it open, shall we? What are psychologists actually looking for when they use these tools? What are the key areas, the domains they focus on when they're trying to build a complete picture of an individual? Turns out it's not just one thing. They're looking at a few different levels. They're basically looking at three main areas. First are psychological attributes. These are the stable things, like your personality or your intelligence. Second, they look at our psychological processes. This is the machinery of your mind in action, like how you think, learn, and remember things. And finally, they look at our observable behaviors, what you actually do out in the real world. Okay, so now we know what they're looking for. The next logical question is, how do they look for it? What are the actual tools rattling around inside this toolkit? This is where it gets really practical. Let's break down the four primary methods or tools that psychologists use to gather all this info. First up, psychological tests. You've probably seen these before, things like IQ tests or personality tests. They're standardized tools, which means they're designed to measure specific traits in a really consistent way. Second tool is observation. And yeah, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's about carefully and systematically watching how someone behaves, either in a controlled lab setting or just out in their natural environment. Third on the list is the interview. This can be a really formal, structured Q&A, or it can be more of a free-flowing conversation. Either way, it's a super direct way to get information straight from the source. And the fourth tool is the case study. Now, this is the real deep dive. It's where a psychologist does an incredibly in-depth study of one single person's life history and behavior to create this really rich, comprehensive psychological portrait. So, with all these tools and all these different domains, you can probably imagine that psychologists have studied a massive range of human traits, but one of them really stands out as maybe the most researched of them all. And that attribute is intelligence. For well over a century, psychologists have been trying to define it, measure it, and understand it. It's a perfect example of just how deep this science can go, to understand just one single piece of what makes each of us so unique.
So, when you put it all together, that's what this is really all about. The whole science of psychological assessment is, at its heart, a quest. It's a mission to map out and just appreciate the absolutely incredible, almost infinite variety of what it means to be human.
And that leaves us with one last question. For you, now that you've seen the toolkit, if you could use it to measure just one thing about yourself to understand it better, what would you choose? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.